Good morning, Brian and Brittany. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's Saturday morning, so it's a weekend. I really appreciate that you found time to join me today and talk about your experience with instructional design, learning and development. So let's start with some maybe introductions.
Hi, my name is Brittany Bing, and if you saw me last time on Ekaterina's show, I am back again. And how I got into instructional design, I started off with my undergrad in psychology, and I planned on being a clinical psychologist, and obviously that did not end up being my path. As an undergraduate, I was a student coordinator for orientation and family engagement at my alma mater, and I helped the director plan commencement and orientation programs. And I was a lead along with my other peers to design trainings for 200 plus students. I fell in love with that since then, and I decided to go pursue my master's in instructional design and technology. And afterwards, I just took off with it. I had an internship within my department on campus, and I really fell in love with what instructional design is, and I took a full-time job currently at City University of Seattle, and that's where I'm at now.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brittany. And then Brian, your story. How did you become an instructional designer, learning and development practitioner? How did you get to the to the point where you are right now?
Yeah, I didn't plan on doing this. In a previous life, I thought I wanted to be a secondary Spanish teacher. So I was teaching Spanish music and ESL, and then I didn't want to be anymore. And so, I thought I was leaving the world of education. I moved out of state, moved to Washington, and started working in the tech industry. Um, and then when I took a job at the the IT help desk for a hospital organization, the training that I received was not aligned with any sort of best practices. And so after I completed the training, I kind of got commissioned and also kind of volunteered to fix the training. And as I took ownership of that over, the 3.5 years I was there, it turns out that that's called instructional design. So I was self-taught originally, and I did that. And then I liked what I was doing, but there just wasn't anywhere to grow in the healthcare field. So I went over to City University of Seattle, where I worked with Ekaterina on the e-learning team. Yeah, and I did that. And through that process, I also got a master's in adult education and instructional design. And then after that, I, hopped back into the business world and worked for Kaplan Professional as an instructional designer for their leadership and development product line. So, and then after that, I moved over to Amazon, where I am now, and I'm an instructional designer for a learning and development team for one of the subset organizations at Amazon for selling partner support.
Well, yes. Well, it's kind of interesting that we all three of us worked at City University of Seattle. This is how we know each other. We
Yes.
were colleagues at different, periods of time. So it was a wonderful experience working with all of you. Now we all have different jobs, different adventures, but this institution is what we have in common. That is interesting. Well, and my story is probably similar to yours, Brian. Um, I started, so I'm originally from Russia. I immigrated to the United States many, many years ago. But in Russia, I started my career as a English instructor, English as a foreign language, Russian language instructor. So one of my degrees is in adult education and in linguistics. So I was also working on my doctoral in linguistics in Russia, and then I moved to the United States. I continued in my career in education. So I was teaching ESL, English as a second language. I was also a director for paraeducator bilingual assistant program at one of the colleges in Washington State. So education, but the how I kind of got into instructional design was very gradual. So because I was teaching primarily in person, and then around that time, so it was 2007, 2008, higher education started experimenting with e-learning, and I was one of the first professors who designed a hybrid class. So it was a brand new experience to me. I learned how to use LMS, what was interesting is that transition from in person to online, and how to do that effectively so you're not losing connection, you're not losing engagement, so students are interested, so it doesn't feel like students are taking something from a website. It feels like an engaging learning environment, yet done online. And that was a brand new experience to me. I remember I made a lot of mistakes, but that was a learning process. And then I got my first job as a instructional designer at the State Board for Community Technical Colleges. So they received a grant from the Gates Foundation to design this hybrid, let's call it online e-learning program for all ESL programs in Washington State. There are 34 colleges in our system. So I was the only instructional designer. There were like 50 people on my team, subject matter experts from all the colleges. And we were all working remotely. And then I was a project manager, a problem solver / instructional designer who put all that content in LMS, and we designed that wonderful thing. And so that's how we contributed to expansion of hybrid education, e-learning in our state. I'm really proud of this. And then after that, I basically my career in instructional design and e-learning happened from those jobs and those experiences. And now I've been working in e-learning, instructional design, most probably learning and development, I would say, for the last 7-8 years, so in different roles at different institutions. And I know the reason we are kind of talking about it, right? So I have a goal for why we talk about our experiences and our stories, is because I am connected to so many people. Well, in my field, it's mostly educators, and they sometimes I hear that they want to transition to instructional design, learning and development, and they feel like, well, we don't have a master's degree, we don't have a formal education, and it's not like we want to spend you know we want to go to a university again, get that degree. So how is it possible to transition from teaching, being an educator, to being a learning and development specialist, instructional designer? So I did that, and I think that people who have this background in education are the best learning and development specialists, experts, because we know how human brain works. We know the principles of learning science, neuroscience, and we know how to engage people. But then, of course, the e-learning component, the tools, I think you can learn that. You can learn how to use storyline and all the tools and software to support this engaging learning experiences for your stakeholders. So I think people who have background in teaching, in education, become the best learning and development professionals. But I'm biased. Maybe not. I don't know. I
Um,
just I
of
just
course,
wanted to say
I'm a
that.
little biased too because I am not an educator. And yeah, but I will say I don't want to use the word the best way. This is the best way to do it. I think as you described, those both types of people have different experiences. They both can collaborate and help each other. So, like for example, I've been on teams where I had majority of the people around me were educators. They've been teaching for 20, 30 years, and they wanted me to design content. And I appreciate where they're coming from because they've been in the classroom, so they know how to facilitate. They know what the learners want. And I'm coming from a standpoint of one, like everyone makes a joke that I'm a good project manager. So I come from a standing standpoint, and I know how to put things together into an artifact. And like through my education, I was able to learn all the software, Articulate, Camtasia, Adobe. So I'm able to quickly put things together. So I think both skills complement each other. That's how I see it.
Absolutely. I agree. I also work with a lot of educators who have some interesting ideas about how things should look like. And you're like, well, there are principles behind instructional design and learning and development and brain science. Brain science. So let's actually apply those principles. Definitely
Yeah.
there are a lot of interesting conversations. So Brian, you in tech. Would love to hear your experience working
Yes.
with tech people and SMEs.
Sure. I think I guess, I'm unique in my role, at least, at Amazon, as someone that comes from a education background, but also, I'm a self-described tech nerd. So I understand what it is that they're trying to do. I think a lot of what I run into with the stakeholders and SMEs and design partners that I work with is that they're just limited by their experience, lack of exposure to new ideas, which isn't their fault. But a lot of the people that I collaborate with just are mentally stuck in the rut of this needs to be a very linear point and click e-learning that has a multiple choice quiz at the end. And if I just spew knowledge at them on a slide and then they pass a quiz, that means that they've accomplished something. So a lot of what I do is kind of just I ask all my colleagues poke fun at me for this, but I'm going to say I'm going to ask you more questions than I'm going to answer. So just asking them what it is that they want to accomplish, what they want the end result to be, and then I give them ideas on how to design that, whether that's the technology that we're going to use. COVID, surprisingly, Amazon is a very in-person company, despite being very global. At least my corner of Amazon is just used to collaborating in person, and so with COVID and the push to work from home, there was a need for like a wrap in how to do training and how to do learning and development in a totally asynchronous way. And so it's been exciting to be part of that and just sharing with people.
Well, it's a perfect segue to perhaps a conversation about how do you design training that is, and Brittany, you had a wonderful term that you used that I was not familiar with. So you got to say that again because I
Yes, I
forgot.
will.
It's well, I call it skills versus complex behaviors, and I'll just give two examples. How do you design training that, for example, would teach people how to use Tableau, like any skill, right? Software in this case, but any skill, concrete, straightforward, versus how do you design training that, for example, training on leadership and development. So your clients, your target audience would be people who lead teams, managers, project managers, and they, for example, want to learn some principles for team engagement, working remotely, leadership, how to become a better leader, whether you're a manager or not. So leadership is actually not synonymous to management. Or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now there are a lot of companies who want to train their employees on the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the training I see, in my opinion, is not going deep. So because it's complex behaviors, you don't want to have a bunch of videos and then expect people to start implementing those principles into their practice. So basically, how would you go about designing training that focuses on skills versus training that focuses on changing behaviors? So in Brittany, you had a term which I forgot.
Yes.
Tell us. It's going to be recorded forever, so I will never forget.
Yeah, so what you're describing, Katrina, is procedural and conceptual design. Procedural designs are what you think of ABC 1, 2, 3. So how to design something in Tableau, how to track data, how to be safe around campus. Those are things that are procedural because it requires steps, and those tend to be more linear because you need to achieve step 1 and go to step 2, step 3, right? So because of that, in my opinion, this is where my biases kind of come in. I think procedural designs are a lot easier to craft, and you can just put something online through Articulate or through Rise or whatever LMS your company has, and it's there. It can also be virtual in a live session too, if it's in a facilitative kind of way also. So there's that. Then the other option, what you're referring to, those soft skills, are the conceptual design. And that is when you're trying to have your learners not only understand a concept, but also apply it to their role, which can be a little tougher to do, especially I think with this case, not just, you have to have the learners understand why is this important to me? And that, I feel like that'll be the main question you're asking yourself when you're designing a concept. Why should I care about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why should I care? Um, I'm a teacher, I'm a full-time faculty on tenure. Why does this matter to me? So it can be a bit of a harder selling point to get something conceptual. And because of that, what my recommendation is for conceptual designs, from my experience designing them, I actually stepped away from e-learning with those. And instead, I had small facilitative discussions and had a safe space where those learners could openly say what their opinions are about this. Why does this matter to me? And then I also ask questions to gauge what are their experience with some of the concepts. Have they ever been in a situation where they have experienced bias? Have they ever been in a situation where they defended someone who had a bias happen to them? So that way it gets them thinking, and then it'll click a bit more for them to understand why it's relevant. Um, I've also done micro learning conceptual videos too. So FERPA is a very complex concept to understand how documents work in higher education and privacy. So actually, I remember, it's a funny story. I designed the video during my internship, and my manager at the time, she handed me this very thick book. It's called FERPA Simplified, something like that. But it was a
Simplify the
really
whole book. Okay.
and I'm looking at the book and I'm like, I don't know if this is simplified. So I actually had to go through each chapter of the book and to take out different concepts that mattered with FERPA. And then I had to tailor it and simplify the language to my audience. And in that case, at the time, it was student employees who had no experience with FERPA documents. So those are my recommendations to how to handle those.
That's a wonderful blueprint. So whoever is watching this video, so hire Brittany to design your training because she has very good conceptual knowledge how to approach uh, different types of training and how to engage people. Wonderful. Brian, your
Yes,
turn now.
Brian.
What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, I'm totally aligned. That was very an Amazonian phrase. Sorry. I'm aligned with what Brittany is talking about. What I've found through, I've had 5 jobs in a row now that my job was instructional designer every time. The environment was different. People's lingo around describing their frameworks was different. And I think all of us in the L&D field know that. But like I said, what I've learned is that different teams use different frameworks or different ways to describe it. So maybe just to show different, the same concept with 2 different frameworks, the 2 that come to mind are, one of them I used in the, leadership and development product line at Kaplan, which is Trigger-Support-Imbed. When you're working with design partners that don't necessarily want you to, give them a master's in education to be able to just design their course, right? Having these kind of, ABC type frameworks helps a lot. And so, with the I guess in, leadership and professional development, it was exactly that sort of soft skills or leadership, right? You're expecting a change in behavior or attitude. And so that Trigger-Support-Imbed framework worked super well for us, and the idea is that you need to trigger, a lot of these are uncomfortable conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or you design a situation that triggers them to think about it, right? Adult learners aren't going to really internalize something or change their behavior unless they see how it impacts them, and they have to feel those feelings and think those thoughts, right? So you create a scenario that triggers the learning event, and then you support them through it, right? I'm a huge advocate of, wherever possible, the way that you teach something should mimic the way that you expect to happen in real life.
Absolutely.
So and again, that's not always possible. We are restricted sometimes by things needing to be asynchronous or virtual or all sorts of factors. But, if we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, let's just pick inclusive hiring, right? That's one that I've recently worked with. We need to create a simulation of that, try and make it look as much like it'll happen in the real world. And we create an experience to support the learner through that. And then what I love the most is the embed part, is that training doesn't stop as soon as the trainer leaves the room or the learner finishes the course. We also need to continue setting that learner up for ongoing success that's, accountable with their manager. So you kind of rely on that partnership with your stakeholders to say, I can, do the trigger and support phases with you, but eventually I'm going to be gone, and we want our learners to continue that behavior. So we need to find ways to embed that in their process. The other framework that I wanted to share, maybe this one's more in the interest of, like I mentioned, sometimes you need to be able to advertise what you do in the specific lingo of the company that you're trying to advertise to. So the framework that Brittany described of procedural and conceptual design, did I get that right?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, that phrase was new to me too, and I love it. It's very concise. The way that my team describes a similar thing, and this is a design problem that I'm working to solve with my stakeholders right now, at a broad curriculum level, is that we describe it as operational knowledge. So I use the term click by click instructions a lot. We're a tech company. So what are the steps? I guess like to describe my job a tiny bit, we create trainings for account managers that are in charge of supporting sellers and vendors on Amazon and helping them to grow their business. So there is an operational part that they need to know. So for example, a Tableau dashboard. What button do I click to get a filter? What's the website to get to this dashboard that I want, right? That's all very operational. And unfortunately, that's where, I noticed not just in my role here, but in a lot of emerging, maturing leadership and development programs, right? A lot of the learning just stays there, right? Let's watch a video about what you click to generate a report. Sure, we need to teach them that, but that shouldn't be the end of it. So we've got operational. The next is tactical, which is a deeper understanding of the tool so that you know how to leverage it to get what you want it to do. So in this example of Tableau, sure, I know what to click to get a report, but if it's not showing me the data that I thought I wanted, do I understand how this dashboard was built, where the data is coming from, so that I can set up the right things to get the result I want, right? That's a deeper understanding of that. And then the third one is strategic. This is kind of the gold mine, right? So how can I, as an account manager, how can I synthesize what I'm seeing on this report, the input that I'm getting from my, selling partner, what their wants and needs are, input from my leadership team about what our business goals are, what I know about the market for the industry that I'm in, so many factors. So how do I synthesize all of that and create strategic recommendations that fit this exact scenario that my selling partner needs? So again, that was very lengthy of an explanation, but you divide it into operational, tactical, and strategic learning, and then we're able to build out a curriculum that kind of sets those up as building blocks.
Well, this are all wonderful, and I think because we now work in different industries, not necessarily industries, but different, like Brian, what you said, different organizations, they have their own lingo and also different approaches and culture that will influence your design approach, your thinking about how would you deliver this program to your stakeholders. So we all work at different organizations now, having this very diverse conversation about different approaches. Hopefully we'll give other LAD professionals ideas how they can implement these strategies with their companies. And my example, I absolutely agree with everything that you just said. Really, at different points, I've used different approaches, but it's kind of interesting. What I do right now is probably design and training that goes into behavior. So it's more of a changing. Changes the way we work. So it's very complex, and I can give you a very specific example. So we are transitioning into online e-learning more. All colleges, all universities, I think they see this
Yes.
need because of COVID, and then because our students, they want this flexibility. They maybe not necessarily want to come on campus for every class. That's why this need for designing hybrid, and there's this new term in education, high flex, very interesting approach. And online, high flex is very popular now. So we are thinking about how we can create programs that would be either entirely online or high flex. And my role is working with stakeholders, professors, to help them understand how they can design those experiences for the students. It's kind of train the trainer approach. So I don't design those experiences for them. I am training them so that they can use these tools and use them when they are creating those courses for their students. So it's train the trainer approach in my area. That's what we call. And because it's changing the way you think about your instruction, your delivery, it's very complex, because sometimes you work with faculty who feel like, they've been teaching this way for 20 years. Now they want to change their practices, and they don't necessarily know how to start. Or you have faculty who are excited and they want to try this new approach, but again, they lack knowledge about how, where to start, how to use tools, how to, it's just a lot of how to's and a lot of working on changing your behavior. So my goal now is to figure out this strategic, a sustainable, design a strategic and sustainable approach, so that we could have very flexible training for faculty. And we're talking about 700 people, maybe more. I don't even know. And they're all very busy. So taking something full time is not an option for them. So we need to design micro modules that would be maybe self-paced. And then at the same time, we could maybe offer some coaching sessions where they can come. The coaching is very important, because after you took this micro module or watched a video, even participated in a live webinar. So what's next? The next step is missing. And when stakeholders, subject matter experts go and start implementing those principles, they sometimes have even more questions. So they need to have that opportunity and safe space to come back to me and say, hey, I watched your webinar, or I attended your presentation you did last week. I started implementing those principles and they suck. They don't work. What's wrong? And it's a one-on-one and sometimes small group coaching conversation about how can you tweak these principles that would work for your environment, for your students, for your situation. So I'm finding that in my line of work, there's a lot of need for this coaching. and one-on-one or small group. I like small group because sometimes people actually learn more by hearing what their peers are saying and sharing. So I like, and it's also more sustainable than doing one-on-one with 700 people. So this is what I am learning right now in my line of work, and kind of going back to this example on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you happen to be a DEI leader who are trying to figure out how to implement training and that would actually have a lasting impact, I think you would learn a lot from this conversation. I've mostly participated in training that had two distinct approaches, and I think both of them kind of don't work. So number one, you start your new job and there's this HR package that is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, all very well put together, designed. The design aspect is beautiful. There are lots of videos. There are lots of interesting scenarios, and there are lots of quizzes. And there's this pressure to complete this 10-hour training in 3 days. So what happens is you go through these videos as quickly as you can humanly go. uh Possibly it's just like you are like, I don't have 10 hours and I need to just click and just like, get it over with. So your desire to learn in this situation, it's kind of interesting because you want to learn, but at the same time there's this pressure. You're starting your job, there's this HR component, you have to, and it just kind of kills your motivation, really. So there's that. I've done that a lot. Many companies use this approach. And there is another approach that where you have like a workshop, a day workshop, where you invite companies invite DEI leaders, practitioners, and they have wonderful sessions, role play, uh, discussion, small group discussion, and it just ends, and that's it. So you do this once a year. The whole company participates. You have wonderful time. You have so much fun. You've learned so much, and then you go back to your old practices. So both approaches, I think it needs to be a combination of both. We really need to start thinking about how to not just make people aware, like unconscious biases. Now I think everyone understands that we all have unconscious biases, but how do you go about actually using those principles in your work and sticking to them? Because it's so easy to just quit. You're like, oh yeah, I know I have unconscious biases, so what? Who cares? I'll just go back to my old practices of hiring people the way I've always been doing for 20 years. So it's just what I think we're finding is it's much more complex. Just sending designing a bunch of videos, role plays, and quizzes, or even having people participate in this wonderful one-day event. So learning needs to be ongoing. Coaching conversations need to be happening in a very safe way, because not everyone would want to share what they have, the struggles they have. You need to have a professional, like a therapist maybe, who would keep certain conversations confidential, because otherwise people would never come to you with certain questions. That is something that I'm very interested in, and I'm trying to figure out for my organization, and just love talking about it in general.
Yeah, I'll hop in here. I'm curious for Brittany's opinion on this as an actual psychologist. But one of the things, I guess, in a future life, I probably will end up being a therapist. But I've found that emotion is a powerful tool. Whenever you can like attach learning to some sort of emotion, it could be, you get people excited, or you make people feel uncomfortable about having to confront their own biases, or uncomfortable about having to see someone else's experience, or you make someone happy, or you make it silly by throwing in dad jokes into your learning. That's might be one of my signature moves.
Yeah.
But right, you attach emotion to learning, and it deepens the connection. And Brittany, I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Yes, I do agree with you, Brian. I prefer shaking things up and making people uncomfortable in my trainings, but I mean, we have to get you to talk somehow, and that's how you're going to talk to me. But what I want to touch on with emotion is it's all relates to what you said, Brian, previously about continuous improvement. And I've had those experiences too with some stakeholders. When I design their content for them, I give it to them and I tell them, hey, I'm going to be gone tomorrow. You have to maintain this. You have to continue this, and it drops from there. And that has been my experiences when I've done onboardings myself as an employee with anything about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is from my experiences, sometimes stakeholders, their emotions aren't tied to, I don't want to use the word care enough, but to continuously improve it. So in cases, what we get in return is that 1 day workshop. We do the workshop, we sing kumbaya, and then we go home, and then we're continuing doing the same thing over and over, and we're not improving. Or in other cases where you are handed a module for you to complete, and within 3 days, and I'm guilty as charged, I do skip through some sections and speed read some things. So yes, Brian, I do agree with your point of emotion, but I also think when we are designing our content, is to also consider the motivation from your stakeholders too, because eventually in the long term, they're the ones that there's going to have the product. They have to give it out to the organization. They have to continuously improve on it, because like you may not be at Amazon one day, I may not be a city one day, you may not be where you're at one day, Katrina. So yeah.
Well, one interesting, I think, piece that we as learning and development leaders may not necessarily be able to solve is accountability. So I guess my question to stakeholders would be, do you want to just learn for the sake of learning, or you
Exactly.
actually want to change your behavior? And that's the accountability piece. Maybe if there is this module in your leadership training on how to retain your employees, at some point you need to be a manager, needs to be held accountable. If there is a turnover at your department and people are leaving, and every year you end up with a new team, well, the manager of that manager needs, or HR probably, yeah, HR needs to take a hard look at the practices and why people leave and what's going on. So I also find that sometimes we can do training, we can have coaching conversations, we can do all kinds of things and design wonderful learning experiences, but it will not make a difference if there is no accountability, if leadership, executives at your company are not involved, and there's no strategic uh, strategic planning where it says, yes, we do want to be a diverse company that doesn't just hire diverse people, but actually retain people once they get hired.
Exactly.
And that actually needs to come from the top.
Like from up from top.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been, I can talk to you for hours. It's just, I actually like, the more we talk, I think the more we want to continue talking. So maybe we should do another video and talk about international designing training for clients who are all over the world. So there's this linguistics component, there's cultural component. How do you design training who and the target audience is not just people in the US, but international stakeholders. So that would be a wonderful conversation to have maybe somewhere in the future. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, let's
I would
let's
love that.
do that. I would love that too. I want to learn from you, and I have some experience too, of course, being from Russia and yeah, working with people all over the world. So that I would love to share that for everyone, for anyone who will be watching these videos. And so, do we want to just say a few words to just wrap up this wonderful conversations? Like, uh, just 10 words of wisdom to a learning and development professional or somebody who wants to transition into this field.
I would say, I don't know if I can do this. I guess 10 words.
Uh, could be 20.
Uh, 20, okay, 30. No, but the one thing I would say is I think just this is just a lesson in life in general, that it's never too late to change things in your life. So if you have been an educator for 20 plus years and you're interested in instructional design, it's never too late to get that going and get started and figure out what tools you need to get there. Or if you came from higher education and you decided, you know what, I want to go into the tech industry, it's never too late to transition there. So yes, it's never too late, and don't give up and stay motivated. And the last thing, that's a piece of advice to any instructional designer, is to always stay up to date on what's current. That will take you a long way to stay up to date.
Wonderful. Brian, your turn.
Yeah. Yeah, my parting thought is along the same lines as Brittany's. It's going to take me more than 20 words because I have to attribute something. But one of the mindfulness podcasts that I listen to, which I'll recommend, it's called New Mindset Who Dis. But I forget the exact verbiage, so I may have to look that up and share it with you all later. Anyways, but it was talking about not letting yourself be limited by the fact that you can't do something yet. And the analogy they used, which is personal to me because I used to run more frequently and haven't lately, but the idea was like, you want to be a runner, don't stop, like don't hold yourself back from going on a run because you're not a runner yet. Like, okay, go on one run. Congrats, you're a runner now, right? And I think it's kind of the same with instructional design. If you, or any field you want to get into, you might not have a convenient path that's very obvious for any future employers to see, but the way that you become an instructional designer is to start designing instruction, right? So whatever you are working with in the field you're in, start looking for opportunities to design instruction, to improve training that's there, start sharing ideas, start meeting people, making connections. And that's ultimately how it's, the three of us, that's kind of how we've grown into our fields we're in now. So that's my, again, to summarize, if you want to become instructional designer, just start designing some instruction and go from there. Yeah.
Yeah, I love everything that you've said, and for me, I would also add, don't be afraid to reach out to people who are in the field and just have a
Absolutely.
conversation with them about, hey, what's your experience? How did you get there? What is it that you do at work? So you can start looking for those connections between what you're doing now and what you want to do, and you start building that bridge. Because, like Brian, what you said, you need that time. You can't just become a marathon winner in without practice. You need to start small, see what's new, the trends. Brittany, like you said, I need to understand the trends, and you just start doing your research, watch podcasts, connect with people who are in this field, because there are lots of people who would just give you free advice. They would just love to connect with you. Or maybe join some networking interest groups where people are already in the field and they are getting together for just to network and exchange ideas. Maybe start from that. That's how I am actually learning about marketing now, digital marketing. And this is exactly what I'm saying, this is what I do. I watch a bunch of videos, attend networking events, and I just started talking to people who are doing marketing so I can understand what is digital marketing, how I can gain the skills. And then I just find a lot of tutorials, sometimes even free tutorials that would train you on how to do things. And that's, I don't know how long it will take me, but I feel like, marketing skills, especially digital skills, is something that is important to have regardless of your profession. You don't need to be a professional digital marketer to understand the how the skills can benefit you wherever you are. Thank you so much. Let's
Thank you
meet
for having
again
us.
soon.
Yay.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.